Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending, and instead, I alchemized it and put life back together. Through my own healing, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer and spiritual teacher, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. Today's episode is an interview I did with Amelia Vogler. She's a grounding and energy medicine specialist who I have gotten the pleasure to work with in person and remotely. I have a special place in my heart for Amelia as I met her for the first time at my parents' home. For my parents' wedding anniversary a few years back, they did a vow renewal and made a weekend of it, with healing being a portion of it. That's where Amelia came in. And when I got really sick a year after that, she was one of the people I called on to help guide me through the healing process. The physical body is so connected to the mental part of us, so keeping that thought process tuned up is a must. She has an incredibly interesting upbringing and story on how she got into the work she does today. She has a comforting and supportive way about her that she just lets you know it's all going to be all right. We talk about the deep work of healing, different healing modalities, the art of ceremony, and how to help our little ones and even ourselves with the uneasy feelings at night. I know there are actually way more of us adults that actually are afraid of the dark than we admit. So by helping our kids, we are helping ourselves too. I'm excited to share a piece of Amelia with you today, and I think you'll find her approach to life quite magical. Without further ado, Soul Fam, meet Amelia. How are you?
Ah,
I know.
it's great to see you.
I've missed you. It's been so long.
I know. I went into the cave for 4 years.
I know. That's what
and
was it really 4 years? It feels like it
I
was.
was really close to it. Well, I don't know. I mean, there was a lot going
Yeah.
on before I met
Yeah.
you, just weird stuff, but then everything. I mean, I just had to basically go into a cocoon, dissolve my entire life and rebuild it.
No big
So
deal.
that's what that's what I did, and I'm on the other side of it now. So it's an interesting story, and I know, kind of
Yes.
why it happened
Uh-huh.
now. But going through it, like,
And I remember you saying that so much going on, and I'm like, what's going on? And then you had filled me in. And I think what's really crazy is that I think a lot of people think when you're in this sort of work or you do this sort of thing, like just things don't happen to you. Like there's something, and
oh,
you're like,
right,
it's almost like louder because you are so
yeah,
heightened and so aware, and you have access to so many different modalities and guides and angels and all of these things that it doesn't mean things happen to you for that purpose, but you have a big team. So it doesn't mean you're without your own struggles and tribulations.
no, and honestly, I think when we dedicate our lives to the path,
Mm-hmm.
which we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about, I think the universe kind of goes, all right, let's see what you got.
Yes, for
Let
sure.
me take everything away.
Uh-huh.
Let me invite you to rebuild everything. And like, it is a constant dedication to how do I be the best person I can be in this moment? And what do I learn from that? And how do I show up in a good way
Mm-hmm.
and honor myself? And we can get into all of
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But I have to ask a huge favor. My husband is literally like 3 minutes from our
Uh-huh.
house, speeding here so that we could start, not with the
Oh, the
dogs
noise. Oh,
barking
no
2 minutes
worries.
in, because I've got 3 dogs now that one of them's in the cone of
Oh,
shame. One
no.
of them's 15 and old. Like, Ethel's a terrier mix. She's going to freak out. So
I'm not worried about that at all
that's
because
awesome.
I get to edit these. So I'll just get that part out. Or if we're talking about something great, it'll just be part of it. It's life. So I'm not worried about
Okay.
it.
Well, he was like, "Wait, you're on a podcast today? I thought you were just doing clients." And I was like, "Well, that shouldn't
Right.
really matter." Actually, if I'm being recorded for posterity for every,
Yeah.
historically, that's great. And my clients also matter that much to me. So if we could
Hello.
just adjust that perspective. He wasn't even supposed to be home today. He's taking a male sick day.
Oh, is he? He has a man cold?
I don't know what's going on, but he went to Costco. He went hiking. He's like, went to like, do something with the keys. I was like, this just looks like you needed a day for
Yeah,
errands,
a
which is
personal day.
totally fine. I respect that, but call it what it is. Don't call it a sick day. Call it, I need a me day.
Yeah, we all need those, right? I do that too sometimes.
I hope he comes home with lunch.
Yeah.
I hope he's really productive.
Wait, remind me, where are you? Because your time difference. You have a time difference.
Yeah, I'm on East Coast.
Okay, that's what I
So
thought.
I'm in a little town called Hillsboro, North Carolina. It's near Durham and Chapel Hill. This is like the artsy, cool little river town that's got, the drum community and the dance community and great little restaurants. It's like charming here. So come over
I'm
here
gonna
and
have
visit.
to. North
Yeah,
Carolina.
this summer, because when it's warm enough to swim in the lake and go kayaking and paddleboarding, because we're on a lake right here, and it's so lovely. It's awesome.
That's beautiful. Because how long have you been there now?
So almost a year. I think we got in May.
Because you were
It's
traveling
it's
too for a
really
while.
beautiful. Yes, every year I go and I travel and I put my feet on new earth
Hmm.
and I walk 100 and something miles. So I do that every year
It just is like your
as
ritual.
like
That's like your
yeah,
thing.
that's like my way of resetting. But
Hmm.
this year I have 2 walks. I'm going on pilgrimage to Namibia, Africa, South Africa with a new teacher in the desert and got some really big soul trips, which is exactly perfect because I'm rebuilding my whole identity
Yeah.
in this new plane.
Do you feel like sometimes when those things happen, it's like a rite of passage? The universe, source being like, okay, I'm going to give you more because I know you can, there's things you're going to learn and take from it because there's other people you're going to help and you're going to need these tools and you're going to need to have integrated it yourself before you help others. Do you think that happens when we have these really big things?
Oh, yeah. Like, I think I teach like the cosmological
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary path of the cosmology. And so there are these various kind of checkpoints
Mm-hmm.
where you go through these periods of like losing things and recalibrating and losing more. And,
Yeah.
it's a whole thing.
Part of
So
the
I think
process.
definitely sometimes we have to lose everything to get
Mm-hmm.
to that next. We always have to lose everything at some point.
To rebuild. That makes sense. I definitely, but you do come out the other side. I think we're both proof of that.
Yeah,
That even when that happens, it comes out more beautiful on the other side. So
totally.
I think you have done such a beautiful job explaining what is unexplainable sometimes, feels like, and
Yeah.
making it so anyone, of course, in the show notes, people will have your information so they can find you. But just reading through your website, just on how your approach and why you got into what you do and your ideas about it in general are so easy to digest and understand. I feel like I get new understandings when I was reading it.
Oh, that's sweet.
When I go through there, and I didn't realize, and maybe you told me when we first met, I didn't realize before you started doing what you do now, which we would call grounding and energy medicine specialist, right? And spiritual mentor, energy healer, all of those things. And before that, though, you were in the corporate world. And before you decided to go this route and you had some health stuff that came up. So I'm sure you've told it a million times, but I would love to hear your little journey on how you even got from somewhere so different to what you're doing today and continue to do.
Thanks, Marlo. It's so nice to have the opportunity to share a little bit. The river of my life starts not just at the career level. So I'm gonna move us back a little bit in time, if that's cool.
Okay. Yes.
Just kind of start with birth, but we're not going to
Mhm.
go like, and I was 2
Three.
and 3. So don't worry. For you listening, we're not going to do that.
You will
But
be here all day.
yeah, exactly. Okay, get your coffee. So when I was born here, when I came to this earth in this incarnation, I was born with a gift to see, smell, hear, taste, and sense energy. And my life as a little child was like a kaleidoscope. And I remember it incredibly vividly, especially at the grocery store where my mom would stick me in the little cart, the grocery cart, and my little legs were hanging out of the seat part, and people would walk by me and I would feel my knee hurt, my back hurt, my head would hurt. I would know stories. That person's sick, this person's sad. And then we would leave and I would end up with a really bad headache. And so for an early part of my life, I had these terrible migraine headaches. So I got 2 messages when I was little. You're too sensitive, so AKA shut it down. And that I had these weird headaches that would happen. And if I didn't get medication, I would be throwing up. And it was just an unfortunate little kid way of being. And because my family of origin, as gifted and beautiful and funny and talented and, real as they were, I just kind of shut things down. And I did what I call normal life. And I think doing normal life helps me really meet people in normal life because I lived that. I, went to college and graduate school and ended up working at IBM and SAS, like these really big, wonderful companies. And along the way, my headaches started coming back. So I had a friend that said, why don't you try energy work? And I said, I don't know what that is. And he said, well, it's not a medication. And I was not into taking medications, but I had to for these headaches. I would end up in the hospital otherwise. So the first time I laid on somebody's massage table for energy work, she put stones on me. She started breathing. She held my feet. And Marlo, that first day I was home, all of those sensitivities came rushing back. And I remembered what it was like to be here in a kaleidoscopic world, navigating the difficulties of that, but I had help. Now, I had somebody who understood what it was like to turn these gifts on or, turn the volume down. And she was also a nurse for 35 years. So in addition to mentoring me, she taught me anatomy. She taught me how to see inside the body. She taught me how to listen to the cells, to the mitochondria. So I just got served the teacher of those times. And might be important to talk about where my family of origin was and how I grew up in the funeral home and all that, if that seems interesting. But that was a whole nother overlay of having experience very, very close to the bigness that each of us carry inside of ourselves.
When you land on that thing that's so core who you are on a soul level, it kind of just is more effortless than you would think. Like someone might say, how did she go from working in a corporate job when she was kind of living amongst, the normal life, and then all of a sudden it switched like a light switch and you be so easily absorbing the information and using it. But can you explain what that is? Because to put words to what that feels like and what that's like different than when you were living life the other way, how it had like a flow to it maybe, or
well, I mean, I'm stubborn. So I'm really stubborn. I have a Capricorn moon, which I actually don't follow too much astrology. It's too confusing for me.
Yeah.
But apparently that Capricorn moon in me makes me very good at completing tasks. And I'm a Taurus, which makes me very stubborn. So you put those two things together and it's like, I've got something to do and by damn it, I'm going to do it. I don't know how, I don't know what all the hurdles, but I am going to get this done. And so I think that moment where I came home to these languages that I knew how to speak, the language of spirit, the language of energy, the words, the capacities, the gifts, whatever we want to call it. But that language needed to be spoken. And interestingly enough, as I was continuing to work with this wonderful woman named Sally, the nurse, the healer, I noticed over time my migraine headaches went away. 6 months in, wait a minute, I haven't had one of those headaches. A year, wait, what? It's been 17 years and I don't get migraine headaches anymore. So there was something physiological that was confirming in me what my spirit was also confirming. And so at one point, Sally said, I'm going to stop treating you. I want you to go take a class in energy healing. And I did not understand that. I was so pissed off at her because I was like, wait a minute, you're kind of ruining my life here. I've got this great corporate gig. I was like, because I'm bizarrely psychic and know things I'm not supposed to know, I really excelled in the corporate environment. And it's why I work with a lot of executives is because they're like, hey, what do you see here? How does this resonate with this project? But I could call bullshit in the meetings. And I would go back to my boss and I'd say, that's not a good deal. This part's not working and that part's not working. So it was like golden handcuffs. By the time I left corporate America, I was flying on the jets, the private jets. I would leave in the morning. I'd be home in time to feed my dog in the afternoon and take her for a walk. I would get out of the plane and they'd go, Miss Vogler, we're taking you. And it was like crazy. It was crazy. But at the same time, I went to take this first class. I disliked it very, very much the first day. Called my mentor and I said, you're crazy. This is not for me. I need to go back. And she said, go to the second day. Tell your teacher what you're experiencing. She said, Amelia, you are sensitive to this work and you've had 6 people in your field that don't know what they're doing. Of course you feel sick. So the second day I went through the class and I left, Marlo, and every color in the world was brighter. Everything that I could see deeper. And so I went back to corporate environment and I said to my boss, hey, I did this training over the weekend. Don't you have a back ache? And he said, yeah. I was like, can I put my hand on your back and just practice it? And he's like, yeah, whatever. The pain left instantly. And he said, well, what was that? And I was like, I don't really know, but I'm just learning how to do it. And so I became known in that company as somebody who could help with headaches and pain and cancer diagnoses and, chemotherapy.
Give me goosebumps.
People would come to my office and shut my door, and my boss let me work on them for 15 or 20 minutes. He says, you are a service to this company in many different ways, but especially whatever this thing is that you're doing now. Can you work on my back too? And so what happened was my corporate environment allowed me this amazing opportunity to be both. And I saved my money. I was smart, I got an office. I shared an office with Sally. So on the nights and in the weekends, I would work on people energetically and do hands-on work. And during the week, I would work in engineering, and I was writing documents and doing trainings and, all the things that went into that. That's how my walk off the cliff, to finally answer your question, my walk off the cliff was slow, calculated, engineered. And I needed that. My soul needed to know that I was going to be okay. And so I listened to the part of me that was aching to be working in myself and through these gifts. But I was also, in the world, kind of paying attention to what I needed. And so that was my transition, was slow, grounded, intentional, and I worked for it. And there have been times in my life, I've been doing this 17, 18 years now. Yeah, 17 years. Because I started right at that time around meeting Sally, where I think if I didn't put everything into it, I would quit, because life was really, really hard. And the commitment that I made when I said to my spirit and to the universe or God or whatever we call it, that said, I will show up in service through these gifts that you have given me. It kept me going. I gave up so much to do this and to build it, and I wouldn't look back. It's tough. I actually think stepping into the healing world is a really difficult step, because what you're in contract with is a dedication to be the best person you can be, because anything less than that, I know it sounds a little preachy here. Okay, soapbox. But anything less than doing the best that you can, being as honest as you can, being of the most integrity, anything less than that is going to come back and haunt you, because your energy drops. Your body can feel it. When you are not in your integrity, your physical cells respond to that. And so that's kept me going, because that is my truth.
Well, once you feel that, right? Because that story it's like so complete and so whole and so genuine. And I think some people think, this isn't the job for me, I just need to leave tomorrow. And you're like, well, no, sometimes the hard part is finding what that other thing might be. Because there must be some peace in, even though it was kind of a slower transition, there must be some peace in knowing, but I know where I'm going. So your body kind of probably settles a little bit and grounds more because it has a plan. Right? It was like, you just knew where you were wasn't the right fit, but you also knew what was. So it probably made that direction a little more settling, even though it was a lot of work.
Totally. Absolutely. And I think that is the process of healing that we talk about, is the knowingness of what is within you that's calling you to something different. And it is always in service of something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about when things are, let's say, actions that take us out of that higher frequency, right? So we're not showing up as our best selves, when you're on your soapbox. So all the things that you were describing, it's true, because once you feel and can feel it in your body, what it feels like to operate at a different level, at a different frequency, it's not so much that you stay there because you think it's the right thing to do. It literally physically really affects you and
Yeah.
feels like the right thing to do on like a deep core level. It's something that when you go out of alignment, you're not just doing something that might look to be, wrong or not right, but you're actually hurting yourself because you can physically feel the discomfort of being out of alignment, especially with healing work, right? Because I sometimes feel like I'm held to a different standard because it's like, okay, when you know more, do better. It's like the more you know, you're going to continue that cycle and make this world a better place, whatever you decide to do with that, as long as you're in that alignment, right? But it's hard because you're like, okay, now there's this, I know how it feels to not operate at the highest level. So when I do, it actually hurts me too, not
Yeah.
just feeling like I'm not showing up for somebody else or the collective or whatever it might be.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, spirit speaks to us in many different ways. And one of the languages of spirit is the feelings and sensations of our vitality and our physical body, the little tingles, the truth tingles, the chills that you were just speaking to. That's kind of one side of how spirit is running through our body. And the other side of those physical messages is our health, our well-being, our vitality, our mental clarity. All of these are barometers or tools that help us understand how we are in right relationship with a moment, with a relationship, with an environment, with all of that, with ourselves. Yeah.
It's such a magical little puzzle. And once you feel it, it's like, because I talk about too, and can you explain how you would describe, because you're so eloquent with your words, and I feel like you put these things you articulate them well. The difference between a feeling, right? So you feel something, like a feeling, if someone wants to call that like an emotion, like that's making me feel this way. And the feeling of like that gut feeling, that intuition, and knowing what the differences are. Because I feel like that's something that's really, we all have it, right? You don't have to be a healer to know that you get this feeling and the difference between an emotion. So how do you describe the difference of what that is, and maybe what you would even, someone who doesn't know, let's say starting from square one, it's just getting into this or just learning about it. How do you describe the difference and acknowledge it as that?
Yeah, I love that question, Marlo, because I think we all struggle with that on some level. And I believe that the struggle sits in our dynamic nature. We are always changing. And so sometimes that means that the voice of spirit, either greater spirit or our own, is also changing with us. So to the beginner, to the new seeker, to that one who wishes to keep their eyes and heart open to that which is larger than themselves, the first thing that I would suggest or invite that you survey your life and you look for the largest pattern of how you engage with the world. And so what you're looking for is your vocabulary of spirit. So sometimes, and I'll kind of go at this at a few different levels, but sometimes you might get chills. Like what you were describing, Marlo, those chills of truth. So those chills are physical messages. They are coming from the vibration of your root chakra. Some people, like you were describing, have that emotional resonance with others in their life or with themselves. When they stumble upon a truth, the tears start coming in their eyes and they can feel it. Feel it. That is a second chakra gift or language of spirit. The third chakra has its own language of spirit, which is learning how to find patterns in the world. This is one of my gifts. I'm very keen at finding patterns, and that probably made me a great engineer, is that I can see things and put them together in a very interesting patterned way, and I know when they're locked in. A little more ambiguous. The fourth chakra, the heart chakra gifts, is sort of what I might call relational gifts. So it's kind of like the matchmaker in your life when you know, wait a minute, if I go here and do this, something magical is going to happen. If I date this person and my heart feels this way, I feel bigger. It's kind of like the both and
Mm-hmm.
ability to put things together, alignments, relationships, and think it's the heart. This is all about the heart. Is all about finding relationship of resonance. And then our throat chakra gifts. So these are the things you want to pay attention to. Am I really good at matchmaking? Do I do patterns well? Do I tear up when I see truth? Do I feel tingles? The throat is about messaging. So it is about languaging. It's about receiving written messages. If you've ever tried guided writing or you like to journal, these might be clues that you're a throat chakra person. And then, of course, auditory messages are in the throat chakra too. So those are your hearing messages. And maybe it's not like a voice. We get kind of confused about that. Sometimes the messages come auditorily, but they're subtle. So it's like, I just know this needs to be this way because I received that message. The brow chakra is about visioning. So that could be the colors that I was describing from childhood and understanding how, oh my God, when my mom's field turns yellow, I should probably go out and play. Just kind of learning like how to navigate the world visually, but also about seeing faces in the clouds, seeing the beauty in two people on a park bench and knowing from that beauty there's something else going on. People who tend to go to the museums and love art, pay attention to how you see the world and the relationships that come of those. And then, of course, the crown chakra is knowing. It is kind of that God within. I know this to be true. So step one, finally, again, getting to answer your question. Step one,
I like it.
Survey your life and see of those 7 gifts, which one kind of bubbles to the top. Where do you find yourself? Step 2, and this is where we get to kind of the truth of things. And this is, in some ways, it's more complicated, but in some ways, it's so reassuring. Oftentimes, we have more than one of those gifts. Guess what? We have all of them. You have all of them. You who are listening has all of them. But we have to learn to turn them on, turn them up, turn other ones down. And so there's a sense of overlaying these gifts together. What if I feel chills, but I ask to see what the truth is? And so you start playing with your gifts and overlaying them. And that is how I find truth. If I can feel truth in my body, I ask for a message. I ask to see something. I want to hear something. I want to ask for a medicine card to help me. I know that you work a lot with medicine cards and, asking for some type of confirmation to overlay that message or to allow you to ask more questions.
Do we have more than one? And you answered, yes, we do. We have all of them. It's just learning how to use them, right? And practice them, because it does take practice. I remember when I first learned that this was a possibility, my big life shift that then led me down this path. I was like, wait, I got to practice at this. Like you have to actually practice. It's not something that you just, I think there's this idea that someone says, oh, I have these gifts and all of a sudden here they are. And there are people that have gifts stronger than others. Like to your point, we all have them, but we do have to practice them. We have to practice using them. We have to practice acknowledging what they mean to us. Because my answer for a yes might look very different than yours. So it's very individualized. And although we can learn how to go about it, is a very individualized process and takes a lot of work. It takes definite focus. And because I've noticed with time, do you find that depending on what you've gone through in each layer in life, like experience, like your last 4 years, like that being another big shift in experience, that it uncovers those abilities a little different? Because I have found that happens. Like when I go through these big shifts, I'm like, oh, like I can smell things like crazy. I'm very sensitive to that. Or then my knowing is very different and heightened opposed to where before it used to be kind of what I hear in my own head, right? When we talk about voice, it's pretty much your own. For me, it's my own thoughts, but it's connected to, source and guidance in that way. But do you find that with each life experience, those tend to get heightened, especially if you're already practicing them or aware of them?
I mean, I think it depends on what we do with the situation.
Yeah.
And I think it matters how we resource ourselves through those experiences too. I think
Hmm.
always we will find our way back to ourselves. And whatever the alchemy of that definition is, whatever the alchemy of what it means to come back to Marlo or Amelia
Hmm.
or you listening,
Hmm.
we have a lot of choices about how we're going to get back to that self of us. So, I think perhaps as you work with your clients and as I work with mine, part of our role is to help people find themselves again through these darker times or through questions, or just to help them keep their energy open and flowing, or give them some spiritual direction, helping
Hmm.
them ask some questions. There are times when people just close down, and that is what is needed for them to find their way back to their gifts. But I think that if we take care of ourselves
Hmm.
through these times, even if we're in the dark, and that was my last 4 years, really in a hard place, we resource ourselves in the way that we know how, we come out and we meet ourselves again. And that means that the gifts might be different. They might be more accelerated. They might be more nuanced. They could be quieter to allow for another gift to come through, like reading pasts or future. Or, those 7 gifts are just the beginning of what we have capacity for.
I think that's such a beautiful way to leave people with that, right? So if they're playing with this, if they're starting to learn how to just, if they're new to any of this, and even things you're saying are helpful for me to learn too. Like when you were talking about the knowing and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's why lately I have this like deep, like, no, I just know. Like I just
Yeah.
know. Like it's just there. And it's very different than a stubborn feeling. It's, although you
Yeah.
know it so well, it's like, but it's very, you can, once you experience it, you can see the difference. And how do you explain, kind of on this last little bit to complete the circle, how do you explain to somebody that's like, well, how do you know? You're saying you have this knowing and you just feels this way, but how is that any different than mine or me saying not agreeing with you? Because I feel like where it gets kind of clumsy, say you're not in a session, you're just operating in everyday life and you get these feelings and you go to express them or incorporate it into your life, whether with a partner or friends or children, coworkers, and then you bring that up in a way, right? Well, I just have this feeling, like it's just a knowing, I know we should go this route. And someone being like, but how do you know? Like, how is that any different than what I know or what I think is right? How do you,
Yeah.
I feel like it gets a little clumsy in those moments. Have you found a way to integrate that and express it to someone when it's really this deep knowing that you know is different than just a guess or different than just an opinion?
Ooh, well, I love this question.
Hmm.
And I've got another soapbox for this one.
I
But
love it. Get on that
I'm not going to
soapbox.
step all the way on this soapbox.
Yeah.
But there is a part of us that I think will come through when we know what we know,
Hmm.
that allows us to just simply stand in that knowing without having to say anything. Because when we know, we know.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think it's the most challenging for parents when their children know what they
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
but you think you know better because you're
Right.
the parent. And so, my point in bringing that up is that we have been practicing staying in our truth ever since we were born here. And so, to answer that question, I would say, well, there comes a time when you have to just learn to trust that what you know is what is for you. And that is so empowering when you can stand in the integrity of your knowingness or your
Hmm.
bigness or
Hmm.
your rightness, and kind of hold it in a loving way, not in a stern way, not I'm better than you. This is not a power over, a bigger over, I've got wiser gifts in you over whoever you're speaking with. It's just a gentle, well, I just know.
Hmm.
I just know. And it comes from the voice of spirit and how it speaks to you in those 7 ways or in other ways. And I think
Hmm.
over time we just learn to trust it. But we have to give ourselves permission to listen and listen. Listen to how we interact with life. And
Hmm.
some of the distractions, modern distractions that we have right now, Instagram and, social media,
Mm-hmm.
It's like the call is to find a place in your life where you can find quiet enough that you can hear yourself, and make that place your monastery,
Mm-hmm.
your sanctuary, and visit it often. And even if it's a swing in your backyard, or that you put up for your kid, or it's walking to the mailbox with your dogs. That's one of my walks in the morning, is to the mailbox. It's a mile and a half away down a dirt road, and it's the time when the sun comes up, and I listen and I ask questions. And I ask more questions when the answers come. And sometimes I get half answers. And then yesterday I was walking them and I was thinking about a friend, and an eagle came and walked with us, and it curled like this as we were walking. And I said, thank you. And it flew away. And so the knowingness is part of the language of interconnectedness that spirit is speaking to us. So knowing is about feeling alignments in all these different ways. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think to meditate is it has to look a certain way. You have to sit still. You have to be in your yoga workout clothes, and you have to be sitting in a dark room, with your legs crossed. And I have found I actually don't meditate that way at all. In the past, tried to make myself, because I know it's good to meditate, and then I just can't do it. And I'm like, okay, that's not mine. And some people can do it that way and that works for them. But
Yeah.
mine is the shower, because it's quiet and there's nothing else that's distracting me. So the shower is normally when I get a lot of my hits and my answers, and when I ask my questions. Also in the car, and when I listen to music. So for anyone who's listening, you can create whatever works for you, and you probably most likely already have one. You just aren't utilizing that time or knowing that's what it is. You have something in your life that you do every day that does allow you to have that connecting point. And I think finding what that is like super powerful, because then you just utilize it. Each time you remember, you're just utilizing it more and more. And it's magical. The things that you hear when you're actually listening and you actually ask questions, you will get answers.
Absolutely.
You just gotta know that's what you're doing. But no one teaches this. These are things I think we should be taught in school, and they should be taught to little people, just to understand how to ask these questions, how to get centered with themselves. Because then everything else is easy.
Yeah.
Not easy, but much easier than it's made out to be.
Yeah.
So you brought up, and I was so intrigued by this, you grew up in a funeral home, and your dad ran the funeral home. Is that right? Or your family?
Yeah, the
And
funeral home, yep, it'd been in our family for 250 years. So 8 generations of this family funeral home out of Winston-Salem, and my brother runs it now. And so in my physiology is, seated the energy of caretaking over the grieving, over the bodies. And I didn't live there. I grew up on a little farm outside of Winston, but I would visit there. My dad would pick me up from school and my siblings and drop us off at the funeral home so he could finish up things. And we would put our roller skates on and we would roller skate around the parlor. And he would say, don't go in that room. So we would go in that room. And we would see,
yeah.
we saw, death and
Uh-huh.
and the process of caring for a body very, very early in our lives. And for me, because at that time, I was still very much awake in that kaleidoscopic many ways of seeing, sensing, and feeling the bigness of who we are. Sometimes I could see the spirits in the room. Sometimes I could see, sense, or feel the stories of the people as they're continuing on their journey to full spirit. And what I noticed the most was that their colors were gone and that the light was gone. And so my life started with the inquiry of what is that light and those colors, and how do we stay close to it? Because when we're there, it's gone. And so that was the early part of my life. That was what I was thinking about when I was 4 years old and 5 years old. And what I think about now at 44 is what happens on the other side, because I work with the soul. And how do we bring the soul here, the soul of you, that part of you that is embodied? How do we support that? So yes, you're right. I grew up visiting a funeral home, and that was my introduction to how to be on Earth School.
How
101.
cool. Like the light you're talking about, and you mentioned it just at the end, it's our soul, right? It's the
Yeah.
thing that animates our body. That's the difference between someone, a physical body being here or not. And when we're not tapped into that soul, that light can still diminish even when we're here living and breathing, but we look different, right? Because I would say someone who's tapped into their soul and has that understanding looks different than someone who's doesn't know that's an option, like doesn't know that that's somewhere to get to.
Right. I mean, there is an energy system of the soul. We talk about the chakra system, but that's the system of issues. There's a deeper system or dimension of us. It's called the hara. I know that's kind of geeky, but
Like it.
but that is what carries the template of our vitality, our stories, our dreams, our desires, our longings, the constructs of us. So there is an aspect of us when we are connected to it, we are connected to that bigger story. And when we deviate from that, which we all do, we are
Yeah.
all on this path of going and returning to self. And along that journey, we are growing ourselves in new ways. We're increasing the vibration of our frequency, if we want to talk about it that way. We are exploring different ways to come into health and well-being, and we can talk about it that way. So we are always making choices in the direction of ourselves or in directions that take us beyond. And there are certain ways to anchor ourselves back in that soul essence energy of us.
And it feels so cool when because I think you get it in moments, maybe. Everyone's journey is different. I'll say for myself, I got it in moments growing up. And then there was a long period where I didn't know I wasn't connecting with it, but until life kind of flipped on its head and I started to feel what it was like to lean into and align with that soul purpose and that soul of mine, did I know what it felt like to not be there? And I was like, oh, that's what that feeling was. That's what that heaviness was, that unhappiness, that disconnect that felt like life wasn't working out in my favor, or always reaching for something that felt unreachable. I was so disconnected from that soul. And I kind of almost explain it as the energy feels like you just keep reaching for something that you can't quite touch, but it's like right there. And then when you stop reaching and you actually turn within, which again sounds very cliche and cheesy, but when that you go back to, wait a minute, let me realign with what's already here. That feeling is so, but like you said, still have moments where I steer away from it a little bit, right? You'll get comfortable and I'll kind of get in a habit and I'm like, oh shoot, that feeling is coming up again, but you're super aware of it. Where in my past, I probably would operate that way for years and years and years before I realized that I was out of alignment. And then now it happens in what feels like an eternity could be just days, or it could be a couple weeks, which feels like a lifetime for me now. For someone to tap into that and for you to see that at such a young age, did your parents ever say this is what, with their understanding, like this is a soul, this is life, this is the afterlife? Or you just kind of came up, this was like your just inner knowing and it became your own thought process, not something that was taught to you at a young age?
No, my parents don't speak this language at all. In fact, my dad tells his friends I'm a massage therapist that doesn't touch anybody. So I don't really know what career path that is, but that doesn't look anything like what I really
What
do.
do you do? Yeah.
Or, what I teach or how but over time, Marlo, I realized I have past life recall. There is a whole story of my story that has been resurrected through my awareness of how to read between lifetimes. And the story just came to me over time. But just like we were talking about, there are certain fixtures of those stories that I know are true. And it's so beautiful because I get to see how the choices that I'm making now are healing some of those older stories in this very natural way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I think, awesome to also consider that sometimes when we feel drawn to new things that might be new, uncertain, curious, go for it.
Yeah.
Because that could be answering a larger story in your lifetime. You might need this experience, this new experience, to help you resolve a story that doesn't make any sense. And that's where I think kind of that calling the spiritual warrior within and being curious about what it means to leave a job, to leave a relationship, to feel an offness that you can't speak to, but you can feel. Listen to that, because there's something calling you. Offness is one of those beautiful signposts that your soul is speaking you in the direction of some form of healing. And I try as well as I can to just be curious about those nudges and be smart about it, of the world, because I think we can get really, maybe people like this, or you've heard people talking in the spiritual fields. It can be a very ungrounded field. There can be a lot of spiritual bypassing. There can be a lot of, well, it's just going to work out because it'll work
Right.
out because it's my heart. And pay attention to, how you're going to architect these moves and choices. Resource yourself, create some scaffolding, understand your grounding, go one step at a time.
I love the combination of those, because we can't just have one without the other, right? Just the physical human actions don't bring us the fulfillment and the connection that we're meant to experience. And just living in the spiritual realm doesn't bring us down to earth and actually allow us to experience this world in the most complete, beautiful way that we were put here to experience. And I always feel like, people have different ways of saying it, but I feel like we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the more we can get on board with how to navigate this human world and use it to our advantage and benefit to feel better, fulfilled, make this world a better place, the more like alignment it brings, and things just feel like, it reminds me of saying, like, feeling like before when you weren't taking deep breaths, it feels like all of a sudden you can breathe easily. Like, it's just, there's this flow and this ease to it. So it's why I'm so passionate about all of this, and for Nash too, because I feel like I went so long. And when you look back, for me, I look back and I'm like, oh, this is when that feeling or those questions started to come up, and I negated them. I kind of went the human route of, you don't know, that doesn't make sense. Or that's not logical, or that doesn't, this or that, whatever my human experience was at that time. So with Nash, I work extra hard to allow him to trust those feelings. And when something comes up and when something feels off, like to your point, I think if people take nothing from what we were talking about besides acknowledging that off feeling, is something I can look back, and I think everyone has had that experience of feeling like something's off, but you can't put your finger on it. And then you continue, let's say, or you move through and you're like, I knew it. Like, I knew something was off there. We all have that experience. So trust those things, not in a way where you get paranoid but like you said so beautifully, just be aware, be smart in the world, and start to mesh the two together. And that's really what I think little people could really use the help to guide, because they're so intuitive. Like, they just come here so much closer to the spiritual realm than any of us already here, because they're literally, the younger they are, I feel like the more connected and intuitive they are, because they haven't had adults or other people or the world telling them that doesn't make sense.
Totally.
So with that, and talking about kids, because I feel like I'm trying to explain this to Nash, do you think that there is a different energy to the world and how things work in the evening time? So I would say when it starts to get dark out, I know that depends on where everyone's at, that through the middle of the night, do you think that energetically, is there a different energy, a different force, a different thing that comes up in the evening time, different than the day? And with kids always saying, or consistently saying, they're scared of the dark, or they hear things at night that they don't hear during the day, do you think the veil is thinner? And how can we, instead of saying, well, don't be afraid of it, there's nothing there, because I'm very good at making sure when Nash says that, I'm like, what'd you see? What'd you hear? So how can we help? Because I feel like it starts there, not just there, but it can start where they start to notice these things, and we very quickly be like, no, you're not hearing anything. No, you're not noticing that. There's nothing there. And I think we start to ingrain it in them that their like intuition, their hits are wrong, because they have someone telling them over and over again that they are. So they stop trusting themselves, which then can bleed into a life where they don't trust themselves in other decisions, not just if there's a monster under their bed or not. So how have you dealt with that? Do you feel like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I heard two questions, so I'm going to just clarify them. One was just to speak to the difference in energy between day and night, and that subtle shift, and then also how to help our kiddos acknowledge like what's happening there, using language that's not going to scare the crap out of them.
Exactly.
So yeah, got it. And honoring them, because their voice really matters. So to speak to the day and the night,
Mhm.
I think that, that we could spend 4 days on
Talking about
the
that.
energies of the sun and the moon and the cosmos
Yeah.
and what's here. But if we think about the properties of the sun, you
Mhm.
know, the sun is our life-giving force. It grows all of our food, it blooms flowers, it grows trees, it photosynthesizes, it gives us our oxygen. So during the day, our sun, we eat our sun. Every time we eat an orange, we are eating sunlight basically in our body. And so there is like a strong sense of vital charge and aliveness and brightness that comes from the sun. So that's our daytime. Our noon, a lot of times people are most active between 12 and 2 because of how much sunlight they're getting. And then as the sun wanes into night, we feel that draw, and we have our circadian rhythms, and our pituitary gland is responding to that. So we start kind of ebbing and slowing down. The moon, what is the moon energy? So we see the moon because the sun is shining on it, right? But it's more than that. The moon actually takes the photons from the sun and changes them, and it is actually reflecting its own energy. It's been transmuted and changed at the level of the moon. So it's not just sunlight reflected. It is its own energy of moonlight that is feminine and soft. And think of how it feels to be out in moonlight, to bathe in moonlight. If you have not bathed in moonlight, I invite you to find an area where you can take your clothes off and bathe in the moonlight, especially if you're a woman, and feel what that feminine energy does to the physical body, because it's got its own language. And so I think honoring those cycles are within us.
Mhm.
We are daytime creatures by nature. We sleep, we rest, we dream. So honoring that cycle, because it is honoring ourselves. So those to me are like a nice beginner sort of intro way of looking at day and nighttime energy. And then look at the transitions that happen too. As wisdom keepers, we sunset. We sunset many things in our lives, relationships, foods. I'm having like a food allergy thing right now, and I'm going, okay, I'm sunsetting corn. Goodbye. I'm sunsetting
Yeah.
brown rice. Okay, didn't think that was going to be an issue.
Yeah.
We sunset parts of ourselves, and then they too are resurrected in the dawn
Mhm.
of moments as well. So we can extrapolate or apply these cycles to different areas of our lives.
Mhm.
So to our kiddos who say, I'm afraid of the dark,
Mhm.
you can say, well, I know this lady named Amelia. She's terrified of the dark. I am. Put
Are
me
you?
in a dark wood and I am very uncomfortable. Why? Because some of our senses are eclipsed and we can't
Mhm.
feel the same way. We can't see. And because I'm a seer, being able
Mhm.
to see is such an important aspect of my compassing. And so
That
it's
makes
getting
sense.
to honor in our kiddos, hey, well, what does it feel like
Mhm.
when you're in the dark? Oh, well, I just don't like it that I can't see anything. Oh, okay. Well, that's legitimate. Well, let's go
Mhm.
out in the moonlight because the moonlight can help us see. So it's not as scary. And sometimes the moonlight is quieter, and so we can have a nightlight inside. We can bring the moonlight inside. You
Mhm.
work with
Mhm.
them. And if they're seeing things and sensing things, I love to invite them to draw them. Tell me about them. What is it? And if it's scary, and if it's a monster, if it's something, you might say, well, how does that make you feel? Oh, like I'm not strong enough. And then wait a little while, a day, and maybe ask them at a different time. Hey, do you remember when you were telling me that you weren't feeling strong? Is there some other time in your life that you feel like that? Can I help you with that? Because a lot of times what's happening when they are recalling something
Mhm.
that they're picking up on,
Mhm.
it's triggering, it's being triggered by, or something in them is being triggered by that. And so many times that outward manifestation of an awareness is because of an internal stimulus that's showing up. So we want to check that out. And if they're seeing beings,
Mhm.
have them draw them. Notice how big they are on the page. Are they skinny? Are they plump? Are they, what are the qualities of
Yeah.
them? And have them give them a name. What would you name that guy? What's he like? What kind of sandwich does you think he likes? And then start humanizing them
Okay.
so
That's
that they
great.
can kind of create a dialogue
Uh-huh.
with this being. And then if they get scared and it starts coming back, you could say, well, did you offer him his favorite peanut butter and banana sandwich? Well,
That's
try
great.
that, and then I would sniff it out too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I felt like, and we don't need to go into dark forces and all this, that, and the other,
Right.
but I would say if when he or your child is telling you about this and you get a funny smell, you get a
Mm-hmm.
feeling in your stomach, you get a headache, that is when I would call someone
Mm-hmm.
like me or like you,
Mm-hmm.
to clear the room, clear the house,
Mm-hmm.
just do your due diligence
Yeah.
to make sure that there's nothing hanging out there,
Right.
because there are we live in a world that's crowded
Mm-hmm.
with the other side, and we want to acknowledge that, not be scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that helps us stay unafraid is our ability to stay grounded in ourselves, because that helps us create kind of the integrity of our field,
Mm-hmm.
creates the different fields to help protect us from the other side. But it's kind of like this, Marlo. It's like if we are in ourselves, there's no room for anything else. And that's what you want to instill in your kiddos too.
Mm-hmm.
Like help them be empowered to speak what they need, speak what they see how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That helps them to maintain a sense of, I'm okay here. I can see what's going on here. I'm in charge. And that, I think that's kind of a nice bridge.
It is. Just you explaining it that way, it's like very peaceful and calm to something that could feel very unsettling, right? So I think what you explained is like magical. And I think it's so helpful, and it's acknowledging all the pieces, right? Everyone's a part of it. And what I've always thought too is, like we said, dark forces is not for today's conversation, but how you described it and how easily it can be remedied. I think a lot of the times people feel they're scared of darker energies or heaviness and all these things. And I think movies have made it this big
Yeah,
scary thing. And it really is. I kind of see it as kind of like a gnat. And yes, if we don't take care of it, it can become this irritating thing that is more affecting our life than it needs to. But it always can be remedied. It always can be cleared out. It always
totally.
is. You can handle anything. Like it pretty much
Totally.
can be. And you and I have those tools to be able to do that. And there is an empowerment in that, and knowing, and the empowerment you said is the more we're in ourselves grounded, the less there's room for
Exactly.
things to kind of sneak in or come get in our space that don't need to be there.
Totally. And we don't have to do it by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world, we are social creatures, we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
My gifts are different than your gifts. Your gifts are different than you who are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so together, this is community work. Healing
Mm-hmm.
is done together.
Mm-hmm.
And we each hold keys, and we're each important in these very specific ways. And so I also would just love to impress that this is not a journey that's done
Mm-hmm.
alone, but it's a journey that's done within.
I love that, because it is, right? The spiritual work and the energy work. If you go back and you know more about ancestral healing and acknowledging that piece than I do, and you have that gift going further and further back, although, like you said, it is a within journey, community has always been a part of this process. And I think with time, we've become more lone wolves of, I can do this myself, I can handle it.
Totally.
There's this award we think we get for doing more on our own. And actually, it's pulling us further from that healing space. And I've even had to work on that myself, and
Yeah.
putting too much on my own plate and being like, well, as long as I can handle it all myself, then nothing else can take me down. I'm like, well, actually, that's not true. So
Yeah.
opening up and knowing that this healing work and spiritual work, from as far as we can go back, has been about community, has been about reaching out to each other. And although the deep work is done within and internally, it happens because of the community and the outreach and support.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you spoke to, the last 4 years of my life, and
Mm-hmm.
I have been through 4 years, and maybe you listening have been through periods of your lives like this too, where everything seems to fall away for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. Physical health, weird stuff showing up,
Mm-hmm.
my things in my family showing up, things in my job showing up, my practice. I mean, every single area you look and there's things falling apart. And I remember telling one of my counselors, because I have a great big team, to do what I do requires a lot of support. And I love that because it gives me an opportunity to clear this part or clear that part, or ask questions or study in this way or keep this meridian open, or, just call your people. And so during those 4 years, I called a lot of people. And that counselor, I said, Sharon, I just look at a tree and all I see is a bleeping tree. I can't see the spirit of this tree. And I talk with nature. I talk to flowers. I hear the essence of animals and people and stories. And I was blind for 4 years, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I thought, there's something else happening, so I'm going to sit with it. I called my Mayan shaman, over and over, and I let them hold my spirit when I couldn't hold it myself. And then one day, a little crack, and I remembered myself, and it started coming back. And I started coming back, but I came back new, and I came back different. I came back stronger. I came back, and I thought to myself, oh, this was preparation for my work now. And I saw astrologers who said, yep, in the chart, yep, sorry. This is one of those Neptune cycles. And guess what? You've got 2 of them. Sorry, but I rebuilt myself on the foundation that I knew before. And that foundation was already pretty rich. And so now I lead in a different way. I, guide in a different way. I have a different vibration around me. So, but I couldn't have done it without my team. I couldn't have done it without my community, because we hold the light for each other. And I deeply trust that. And I think in some ways it's helped me show up in my client appointments with an even deeper respect for what it is they're really asking me to do. They're asking me to hold their light for them so they can see it when they can't yet see it.
I believe in that 100%, and I have felt it myself. And I know a lot of us that take this, so that is just who we are, ingrained in us, healers, spiritual light workers. You have your own team. So if anyone thinks that we just get here and then we're just like, well, we got it all figured out. We have our own team. I have so many people on my team because, like you said, to your point, to be able to show up for other people, to be able to hold people's heaviness and their grief and help them heal and see through the stuff to help them connect with that soul. It takes a lot of work to stay in that alignment and to work through your own stuff so that it moves to the side while you're helping other people. But you can only be the best healer as healed and processed as you are yourself. So it takes time, but we have these, I feel like it's like these seasons where I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm not putting a lot of content out there right now because I'm just figuring shit out myself. And I'll come back to the table when I figure out what the hell is going on.
And that's being in integrity with yourself, and it's being in integrity with who you're working with, because when we sit at the table with you, our greatest gift is to be able to put ourselves completely to the side and be a complete channel for you. And if we are not taking care of our stuff, we can't do that. Right.
So going back to how we connected and how we first met is my mom. I don't remember exactly when how she connected with you, but she had you come out to their house, and all of us kids came into town, and we got to work with you, and you created this beautiful experience. Not only is your energy and your presence, and you can tell by just the way you speak and how we've been talking, but your presence is very grounded and very like, we'll figure this out. Like, I got this. I got you. It's a very safe space, holding space sort of experience. We got to work with you individually and in person, and you created this ceremony. Can you talk about that ceremony experience? Because you had specific things, and I remember one of the things was we went out into my parents' garden, or what's like olive trees, and you had us stand in a circle, and I think you were in the middle, and you were telling us how it was going to go. And one of the exercises was we each stepped out of the circle, and we would like make eye contact with each person in the circle. But I remember there was a moment, and everyone was pretty composed, right? But sometimes when you make eye contact with people, when you really do it, you're like seeing into their soul is what it feels like. And I'll stop talking so you can actually explain what actually happens. But what pops into my head when I get that memory is my dad standing in front of me. And he was, at that time, it was his turn to go around. And how many, I think it was like 10 seconds. It wasn't very long, but it was a decent amount of time. And I remember my eyes starting to water. And even though he was smiling, kind of being like jovial about it, because everyone's like, what is this? We're just staring into each other's eyes.
Yeah.
And his eyes started to water a little bit. And before either of us really, cried or anything, he had moved on to the next person. But what I felt in that moment is it's almost like an unspoken, I knew what both of our eyes were watering about. It was this unspoken, and it had to do with what we had been through and what him and I had connected on. And so in that moment, can you explain what happens, eye contact, or why you created that part of the ceremony? Because there was also another beautiful part. We tied things around a tree and with intention, and it was just a beautiful experience. And here I had thought, I don't ever think my healing is done. I know that for as long as I'm on this earth, I'm going to be continuing to just heal and evolve, as that's kind of what I'm here for. But there was a part of me that felt like I had this, I don't know if it's ego or stubbornness, being like, okay, I've gotten a lot of the healing done. I'm always open to more healing. But when that ceremony, when we had those experiences, I still have more to go. And that's just a note that this is going to be something that I maybe continue to heal off and on continuously. It's not like, oh, it's been 3 years, we're done now. Now we're moving on to something new. So can you explain a little bit why that experience is something you made a part of the ceremony, and what actually happens when you do it? Because there is something that actually happens when you actually sit and make eye contact with somebody, and it can be unsettling and uncomfortable because we don't do it. But there's something, and it's an unspoken thing, and all I can explain it is interesting and intriguing to see that this can be so expansive, but we do have to kind of break through that uncomfortable part in all things. But so the ceremony that you came and did for all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Marlo. So that was a beautiful ceremony. And as I speak to it, I want to be very careful to honor confidentiality, to honor the sacredness of the space, the specifics, because any ceremony that I come to lead is going to be created by and through the alchemy of the energy systems there in the space. And I was given this beautiful opportunity to listen to the stories that each of you were carrying at different times throughout that week. And I was fully focused in hearing your stories and giving everything that I could in service to your personal healings, while also paying attention to what was happening in the larger field of the family. And the way that ceremony often begins is with an invocation to the bigness that we were describing. And not just the bigness of each of us individually, but the bigness to the divine forces that are here, the wisdoms, the nature. Ceremony is life at its biggest with specific intention. And you might remember that to begin the ceremony, I was sitting down with that drum right there.
Oh, yes.
And I just had you all sit. And I said, do you have any questions about what we're going to do? I'm here to answer questions, which is about, I want you to feel open to be curious about this space. I want you to feel empowered to language what's coming up for you. But I'm not going to tell you what we're doing until it's time. And I believe that I was drumming quietly as you were sitting down, which is just enough vibration to help us open to the bigness. And it just brings a little bit of a doorway that we can open that says we are not in everyday reality anymore. We are inviting more of us to be here together. And if I recall correctly, I had you all walk around and create a little bundle of herbs.
You did.
And, each of those herbs has their own healing qualities. They have their own messages. They open the energy in a specific way. They open your heart in a specific way. They are emissaries. They are wisdom keepers. They are ancestors. And so for you to bundle the medicine that you need and hold it was a really important piece of that ceremony, because first we're in new space, we're opening the universe to help us. Then you get to create a bundle of allies to help you, into which everything that's spoken during ceremony will be infused in that little bundle so that you become a caretaker of your specific storyline in a larger healing story. And then as you were talking about this moment where you're going around and looking at each other's eyes, I remember inviting you to say, Marlo, I see you. And it was the vocalization of what was happening spiritually. And when we partner voice to energy, it is offering a gift to the receiver. It puts you in direct conversation physically and spiritually. You were talking about being a spiritual body, spiritual self in an earth body. I conceive of it as there is only one world. The spirit and the body are the same. They're just different frequencies. And so when we articulate from that bigness of who we are, we're stepping into that one self. And when we bring one self to one self, then we can really see each other. So that was the intention of having you go around seeing with the eyes, but really bringing voice to, I see you. It's the earth and the spirit together. And that creates an environment where the spirit world can enter in and pierce the physical world in a way for transformation. And there was also space holding. I was drumming. There was safety. I was holding a container and doing things in my own self, in my own body, just according to the teachings that I've been taught, to make sure that you all were held in a container where there was no noise, there was no outside influence, that nature was supporting you. And as I remember, Nash was speaking about his experience, and there was a beautiful hawk that was circling above the pine trees or the cedar trees over to the left. I mean, this is a beautiful thing about energy. We remember everything because it's there. And then the ties, those little bundles that were attached to these longer threads, those became the prayers for healing. And you all, I remember, tied them to a tree, a family tree, metaphorically. In ceremony, everything matters. And so I remember seeing a family with their family tree, with their healing wishes, with their shared visions, with their dreams, and being able to speak and articulate that, bringing the body to the spirit together. And it was I loved that ceremony, but you all created it. It just came through the alchemy of your fields. It's one of the most precious things that I'm invited to do, is to come do ceremony for families and individuals. So
it was beautiful. It was something that I've never experienced before, and I've done a lot of healings, right? I've worked with a lot of different people, and it was something that was just so magical. I mean, there really isn't a word for it, but like you were explaining, that all makes sense, because it definitely was felt. Like you said, the piercing, like it was almost like everything else around us, all the busyness, all the thoughts, all the worries, all the things kind of just like all settled to the ground. And this was what was being focused on. And it's very hard, can be very hard to do that day to day, right? It's very hard to do that without someone coming in and facilitating that, which you did so beautifully. So do you do that with, like, if people were to hear this and be like, oh my gosh, I want to experience this, do you travel and do this for people still? And is that just something they reach out to you for? Because I would recommend it. I would highly recommend it, because it was so sweet. It was such an experience. I do know it takes some planning, right? I know figuring out all of that, but it was, if someone has the ability to do it, I'm assuming in person is the most impactful, right? It's not something you can necessarily do from afar.
I mean, we can do ceremony afar, I have my drum, my rattle, my things, and to hold a space is to hold a space. And so there are a lot of ways. I love to be in the home of people, because then we can bring the energy of the ancestry. We can bring the elements of their yard, their family, whatever we are doing, whether it's blessing a new baby or helping with grief after a loved one dies, or helping people through a transition, or calling a splintered family back together, helping with detoxes. All of these are ceremonies that, anything can be supported by ceremony. So I can go to your house, that's my preference, or you can come to mine. where we have a really beautiful circle, and I can build a fire for you, and we can, do ceremony here as well, next to the lake where I live, and be with the stars, and be on this little piece of land. So there's a lot of options. It's really, and we do design, when I worked with your family, there was a few different phone calls, and I was just asking about, who's there. I think I sent you all my, I think I sent you a form to
Uh-huh.
fill out. I'm sort of a nerd that way, but
Yeah.
I like to see the words
Uh-huh.
of each person, and how, some people write nothing, some people write a paragraph, somebody say, okay, but it helps me understand who are these souls and spirits that I'm coming to work with. And, but whatever we do together.
If anyone can experience it, it definitely was pretty powerful and special. So
Thank you.
that, among all the other things that you do, like I mentioned, your website is very easy to navigate. It's very clear, and you explain so well what you do and how you do it and the options. So we'll put how people can reach you and get a hold of you that way. I think the only other question that I have, so brainwave therapy and energetic mapping, somatic inquiry, and neuroplasticity. So I saw those, and then it was epigenetic healing and ancestral healing. I'm not trained in anything with somatics, but I've been hearing about it a lot. So will you explain to me what that is? Just because I feel like for the purpose that it keeps popping up, I feel like it would be worthwhile for you to hear your explanation on what that is, and people can work with you to experience that. Is that right? Through what you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So somatics is a field of listening to the energy of the body. In somatics,
Uh-huh.
soma means body. So we're listening to the soul in the body. And because I do soul-based healing, soul alignment, aligning you with that, voice of self, the path of self, the light of self. During traumatic or stressful events, our energy gets often distributed. So somatics is about, or somatic inquiry is about inquiring about how the soul or the energy is moving through the cells of the body. And it's really about paying attention to, what is the body telling us? What are the soul stories in our body?
Mm-hmm.
Somatic experiencing professionals taught by Peter Levine, or some of the, embodied lab schools, they might not be using the term soul. They might be using the really just energy, sensation, being curious about how the nervous
Got it.
system is expressing itself through the body. But from my perspective, because we come with so many different tools, when we listen to what's happening in the body, we know that there is a story that's coming from very, very long ago. So somatic inquiry is about coaching you to listen to the stories of the soul that live in the body, asking what you need, resourcing around that. And it is a little part of every session that I do. And we might do it for, it could be a long inquiry, it could be a very short one, we could abandon it pretty quickly. It just depends on what you're needing in that moment. But that's the seed of somatic inquiry, listening to the stories of the nervous system and how they speak in the body.
Pretty much your work would be acknowledging what those are and then helping people with the shifts and changes to support that or remedy what's going on.
Yeah, because I can see a larger story, and we have to be so careful about this, because I never, ever, ever want to tell you your truth. So I have a very specific way of being in conversation with you where I can offer the perspective and the images and the sounds and the smells that I see in a way where you're not encoding it as your truth. So one of the things that I really struggle with is when people come to me and they'll say things like, oh my gosh, well, my solar plexus is just really, it's just broken. It doesn't work. It's under functioning. It's damaged. And I would say, how do you know that? And they would say, well, I went to a healer and they told me that my solar plexus was under functioning. And I said, my God, how long was that ago? And they said, oh, it was like 10 years ago. Okay, so we have to be really careful about how we speak to someone else's story, because at the end of the day, it's their story. And so what we do to bypass that is we listen to what their body is saying. And then I would say things like, I'm noticing this when you tell me that. What's it like to hear me reflect that? Tears, tingles. We dialogue through sensation, awareness, truth, feeling, until we get to a place where we go, aha, that is the pattern we want to work with today. This is what the body is really trying to tell you. Now let's listen to it, resource around it, and then repattern it at that soul level.
In a nutshell.
That's kind of the high level of how we do that.
It's amazing work, and I think it's so powerful, and it comes from such a beautiful, intentional place, which I think is so important with any healers or people we work with on a soul level. Like, that's so important, and I can feel that with what you do. And so that's my soapbox.
Awesome.
I enjoy it.
Peace, lady.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Bye.
weekend.
Okay, just because this episode's over, it doesn't mean our time together has to be. Check the show notes on ways for us to stay connected. And one more thing, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so excited if you chose to rate it, review it, like it, share it, or shout it from the rooftops to those you think might align with it. The more soul-aligned we are, the more beautiful, harmonious, and fulfilling this world becomes. We're in this wild ride of life together. Okay, that's all. I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you've been listening to Wild Voice.